Hey folks, Rob Daniels here from the movie, TV, and video game soundtrack show Visions in Sound. I am on 12 to 2 a.m. every Saturday morning, and I am also on Good Pods, a downloadable app for your phone or other type devices, and a whole bunch of other places, including my website, visionsinsound.ca. Joining me on this kind of special program, we've got Erik Woods, host of the Cinematic Sound movie show or movie soundtrack show.
That's the name of the show from now on. The Cinematic Sound Movie Soundtrack Show.
So movie
I'm gonna
soundtrack
change
show.
it.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
Hey, I'm glad we got to do this because I almost thought we weren't gonna have the time to put this
oh,
together. But I'm
for
so glad. I'm
for
so
sure.
glad that this is all part of your celebration of Halloween. So
Well, yeah. I mean, I've got three more videos. I did a movie, I did a TV show, and I did a video game. And we'll
wow.
and I don't want to give them away here, but
Yeah.
there's some pretty cool stuff that I was able to.
You're prolific, man. Seriously. You're just I don't know where you find the time, but it's enjoyable. Every time one of those videos pop up on my YouTube channel
Well,
or feed, it's great to sit back and watch you wax poetic about the scores that you love.
yeah, I'm having a great time. The thing is that, and when this whole thing came up with the Kingston Symphony,
Hmm.
that for me was just like, okay, I definitely need to do something there. But yeah, over the last, well, at this point it'll be close to 22 weeks now.
Wow.
I've been doing every once in a while, and choosing stuff that is not necessarily the kind of thing that everybody goes, oh, that's something that's something that's kind of standard. But no, I'll go kind of off the beaten path and a little bit different in in my choices and that sort of thing. So that's one of the things. Oh, by the way, I always introduce this guy here. This is Gimli. He is the show cat. I honestly do think he thinks I'm talking to him.
I
Yeah,
think so.
during the entire
Yeah.
show, and that sort of thing. But yeah, he'll he'll come in during the show. He'll leave during the show. He'll do this with the whole nuzzling the nose and that sort of thing. He's done some pretty funny things during the show. There was I don't know if you've seen it, but the one that I did on the Listen to the City, the first
Oh, is
part
that that small Canadian?
yeah, the
Yes.
small the
Yeah,
small
yeah.
Canadian film.
Yeah.
First part of the video is him basically right in front of my face. I'm trying to talk around him and he keeps moving and it's very funny. And at one
Yeah.
point I had to kind of say, okay, Gimli, you need to move down just a little bit so people can actually see my face and I can talk without getting fur in my mouth.
He's
So
like the co-star that now wants first billing, and of course, then next he wants to be a director, run a
yes,
studio. It's very ambitious, Cat.
for sure, for sure. Anyway, we had come up with this, or I had come up with this idea a little while ago to talk about um Halloween scores that um we would recommend to people to say what Halloween music would you recommend to play for Halloween and parties and that sort of thing. And it got me thinking about, well, I mean, there's everybody, there's Ghostbusters and there's this film and there's that film but I wanted to one of the kind of the mandates of what I've been doing over these last 22 weeks is to kind of say, look, yeah, that's a good score, but what about this one over here? Have you heard this one? And so that's kind of where I was hoping that we would be able to take the time that we are going to do this show. And so, like I said, this is the idea. We've got four scores. We chose four scores each, and we were thinking about um the kind of music, the kind of Halloween music that is kind of scary. I have a different philosophy when it comes to Halloween, but yeah, it's scary for sure, but it's also fun. And so I threw in a couple of interesting little fun ones as well. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what your entire philosophy of horror music is, but I think anybody that's watched or listened to my radio show knows that horror music is just one of my favorite genres of music. That along with music that is composed for animation films, I think,
Yeah.
is the most expressive music, and the music that is meant to be noticed. It's meant to be there. It's meant to be heard. It's meant to be part of the plot and the atmosphere. I mean, can you think of a jump scare without music? And
Yeah.
so
Or a huge
I
orchestral sting. Yeah.
exactly. And I think any composer that really wants to be noticed and really just kind of have a lot of fun, not only, let's say, writing for orchestra, but also experimenting and doing something different for the sake of doing something different as well. The horror genre definitely is something that I think all fans of film music
Mhm.
would agree that you can get away with a lot more. I think
Yes.
in horror movies and introduce new sounds and incorporate different techniques from wherever you find inspiration. And horror, that's what I like about horror music. It really is. I mean, I love big orchestral statements and weird sounds at times, and the scores that I've chosen really kind of go along with that.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, it's just such a fun, you're right, it's a fun genre of music
Yeah.
to enjoy. And when you have like an entire month that you can kind of enjoy it without um feeling like well, you're listening to horror music now, it's like, yeah, of course, absolutely,
Of
this is
course.
the best stuff. And I think everybody I think appreciates it and knows what horror music sounds like, although I think
Yep.
the stuff that we have picked on today's show might not be that typical traditional sound that you
Sure.
are accustomed to.
Yeah. One of the things that I also wanted to mention was is that a lot of composers cut their teeth in the
Mhm.
horror genre. So they're the ones that I mean, Chris Young, for a perfect example, got his start with the Hellraiser series,
Yeah,
and people suddenly became aware of him because of those scores. But yeah, a lot of composers come out of that horror genre because it's a genre that you can have fun with, but at the same time you can really build on thematic quality and that sort of thing. So it really brings out a it shows, it can show the skill of the composer,
for sure.
and that's where you get the kind of that's where a lot of when you talk about composers and you talk about their early work. I mean, Freddie Wiedmann, perfect example. A lot of his stuff is very, very spooky, and that those early scores are of his are just really cool. And now look where he's at. He's doing music for Batman Caped Crusader, which is gothic horror in a sense. So there's that. So as I said, who wants to start? Who do you want to
Oh,
start?
go ahead. No, you. I want to hear your.
All
I
right.
want to see where this goes first. Yeah.
All right. Well, first off, um, I thought, okay, well, who am I going to who is, when you think of horror movie, fun horror movies, the first person I thought of was Danny Elfman. And there's so much I could have gone with, but the 1996 film The Frighteners is something for me that when I saw in the theater, the score hit me in such a way that it's it's a it's a horror comedy, but the horror is really scary. So there is moments in this score where it's just really creepy. Also, the one thing that I do like about this score is that the opening title, and I love harpsichord. So it has this wonderful harpsichord piece at the beginning, and it really just it screams Elfman from those opening notes. it's a wonderful approach to what was a Peter Jackson film?
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the first film that I had ever knew that the name Peter Jackson was attached to. I mean, he's been attached to a whole bunch of other horror films, but to 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 see this film and his skill as a director, it's no wonder that he would bring in somebody like Danny Elfman to kind of augment that the horror that shows up in the Frighteners. So yeah, my recommendation would be my first recommendation would be Danny Elfman's The Frighteners. And for me it's definitely worth a listen, even right down to the Mutton Birds um rendition of Don't Fear the Reaper.
It's great.
It's a fantastic
It is.
it's wonderful, and it's again a really good cover of that
Hmm.
Blue Oyster Cult song. So
Hmm.
yeah, The Frighteners, Danny Elfman. That's my first recommendation for this Halloween season.
I didn't expect to like that movie when I saw the trailers and the promotional campaign.
Yeah.
And Michael J. Fox was kind of iffy for me. I mean,
Hmm.
solid actor, but he was just like anything that he was in. I was like, besides, Back to the Future, I wasn't going to the theaters to see Michael J. Fox,
No.
and so I thought it was a wonderful film for him to kind of get out of being typecast, and but the comedy also played into his skill as an actor.
Yeah.
And I just felt that the whole thing was just wild and unique. But you're right, with that kind of dark sense of humor, and that is perfect for Danny Elfman. Now, I'm not, was this Peter Jackson's first kind of studio film?
I think it was one of his first big studio films because he'd been doing a lot of kind of independent horror films.
Yeah.
And
I wonder
so
whether Danny Elfman was kind of thrown to him. It's like as a studio mandate, hey, here you go. I don't honestly don't know, and I wish I
yeah,
knew the
neither do
answer to
I.
that. But I mean, when you're thinking of what is this, mid to late 90s Elfman, it's kind of
Yeah.
right up his alley
Oh
with,
yeah.
Mars Attacks and
Well,
uh
would have been Scrooged. No, it's actually
yeah,
Scrooged was a little
Scrooge was the
earlier,
80s.
but
Yeah.
yeah.
Like
So
Tales
this
from
would
the
have been
Crypt. Um what else was he
well,
working on?
he probably just came off of 93 was Nightmare Before Christmas.
Mm,
So there's that kind of you hear a little bit of those that DNA in the script
yeah.
as well.
But
So
it's not like a copycat. It's really
no,
The
no,
Frighteners
no.
is really its own thing. And you're right, that opening cue is sensational. So if you're recommending just one track for people to listen to that opening cue. If you're not hooked, then that score is not for you.
Yeah.
But it's got a ton of energy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really great.
Yeah. Elfman I at his 90s best.
Oh, totally, totally. I agree.
All right, what do you got?
Okay, I'm gonna go with a film that, man, I would love to see its complete cut because I heard it is one of the wildest, goriest,
Yeah.
scariest sci-fi films, and probably Paul W.S. Anderson's best movie, Event Horizon.
Yes.
The idea of it, um, the supernatural aspects of it, the weird religious messages and whatnot that go along with it, the
Yeah.
visuals and all that sort of stuff. It's right up my alley enough to creep me out. And even if it's truncated form, I think maybe about two-thirds of this film works. You just know that's been toyed with.
Yeah.
But what I really do love about it was that Paul W.S. Anderson wanted something different for his score.
Yes.
And when we're thinking about the electronic orchestral hybrid score, I think nowadays many people would first think of Tron Legacy, a
Yes.
wonderful score blending orchestra and electronics wonderfully. But you got to go back to 1997. Not saying that Cayman and Orbital were the first to do it,
No.
but the way that they work these two kind of, I wouldn't say genres, but styles together. Um, what was really interesting about it though was that Cayman and the two members of Orbital, Phil and Paul Hartnell,
Yeah.
basically had a jam session because they had little time to work on it.
Right.
That's I'm talking about Orbital. So he and the two of them, the brothers, got together along with Kamen and basically did a jam session with I think a small 30-piece orchestra, along with samples and various sounds and whatever they captured, and then that was handed over to Michael Kamen and he integrated that into the score. And as much as the movie is creepy and terrifying and weird, the score is something that I think, again, one of the best blends of these two styles.
Yes.
And without the electronics, I think the orchestral material would just be sort of, I hate to say it, generic is a terrible term,
Yeah.
but when these two styles come together, Kamen's orchestral music really heightens that electronic, those weird sounds, those weird voices, which
Yeah.
apparently were, and if I want to get this correct, were uh, chopped up choirs, sampled
Okay.
from some of,
That makes sense.
yeah. So they were
I mean,
sampled from CDs that Orbital refuses to tell anybody what they were from. So they just, because I don't think they could license the stuff. So they made it so mysterious and different that you couldn't really tell where they were coming from. But what I love about the score and about the electronics in the orchestra is that there's clusters and repeating ideas that just it almost seems like a pulse to that score.
yes.
And then and it's really kind of like it plays in the shadows. And then Kamen, when he shows up, he has the full force of the London Metropolitan Orchestra, and it is like classic 50s, 60 horror, big
Yeah.
brass statements, and the recording of Stephen McLaughlin. God, it's so good. It's so massive. And I think the album itself, oh, excuse me, the album itself is kind of a mix of cues jumbled all together. Nothing plays in order, but the
Right.
album is stunning. It's a wonderful listen, but it works so well in the film as well. And
Yeah.
I think that if you're looking again for an incredible blend of electronics and experimentation, along with that traditional orchestral sound that you expect from horror music,
Yeah.
Event Horizon by Cayman and Orbital is it.
For sure. I was going to bring up the Damon Albarn and Michael Nyman for Ravenous as
Hmm.
well in that same vein of experimentation and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Ravenous is one of those scores that fits the film so well, and you couldn't put it in any other film. But again, Event Horizon, the same thing. It's a shame that we haven't gotten a either an expanded version or a more comprehensive version of this. I think it might be because of the cut up choirs and such. Maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that the Cayman estate. I mean, they've been playing really nice with the labels, but I don't know how it would all work with the studios. I mean, Paul W.S. Anderson had a horrible time because they mandated that he cut everything. I think the original cut was about 130 minutes, and it was really gruesome and graphic.
Yeah,
And
originally got an
yeah,
NC-17.
and I would love to see it, but nobody can see it because apparently I lost all the deleted footage. I'm like,
How do you
how do
do
you
that?
lose that stuff? It's so sad because I think, you know what? If you want to remake something, remake Event Horizon. I think Paul W.S. Anderson should pull a Hitchcock and remake Event Horizon the way that he wants to make it and take it to like A24 or some Blumhouse or whatever and throw some
Yeah,
money at it and just redo it and let's see what he really wanted because honestly this is one of those films where a filmmaker would have a vision and would want to just explore different things and just have his vision on screen and just they took everything out that would have made this
yeah,
great.
yeah. And well, but unfortunately, and we only get very brief glimpses of that
Hmm.
greatness, and just
Yeah.
how devastatingly creepy and brutal that this film is.
Oh, the things that they employed in order to have that, you know, that big group bloody scene that was out there and who they like what they did and how they did it in order to make it seem as authentic as possible. And I think even the kind of flashes of it are still incredibly creepy and
Yeah,
scary and the way they edited it like there's points where you just kind of want to slow things down frame by frame and
yeah,
wondering what in the world are we looking at. That's incredibly effective as well, but there's just you I mean if you look at the making of it, especially check out the Wikipedia of the film,
yeah,
so many neat expanded scenes as well that would really flesh out these characters and flesh out that ending. And but
yeah,
I love the idea of it, I really do, that bending time and space and bringing something evil from another world. And it's that stuff, it's like Alien but on
yeah. On
steroids.
steroids, yeah. And Sam Neill,
Oh, so
the
good, isn't he?
when he delivers that line, when we're going, you won't need
Yeah,
eyes.
yeah, that's right.
And I'm like,
Yeah,
and it just chills you when he says that,
yeah. Yeah,
and I mean,
it's unfortunate, but I think there was a fantastic movie
oh
there,
yeah,
and
there's still
I
a
mean,
fantastic
oh,
film.
I think again, like I said, about two-thirds of it is really really well done. I
Mhm.
think the effects are fantastic, the visuals, the cinematography, like I said, the
Yeah,
acting is great, and I think that came out around the same time as Sphere as well, something very similar.
very,
And that film also didn't do very well, and I love that movie, love that score.
yeah,
So yeah, the idea is there. It's just it just wasn't allowed to come to fruition the
yeah,
way that the director felt like it. But I mean, we do have the score on CD, thank
yes,
goodness, and it's I listened to it front to back today, and it's magnificent.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Well, for me, again, for Halloween, I'm all about the fun as well. I mean, yeah, the horror is good, but you've also got to have that fun element for not necessarily the kids, but maybe even teenagers. I don't know if you're familiar with the Full Moon Studios under Richard Band,
Oh yeah, okay, yep.
where there was a lot of films like, The Puppet Master
Mhm.
and Reanimator and that sort of thing. Well, he would do a lot of these films. Like a lot of times he would do like he would produce these films, and they're the kind of films that you go to the videos when you still went to the video store as a kid. You'd go to the video store, you'd see them on the shelves, and you knew you weren't quite old enough to see them, but you still tried to convince your mom, it's not going to be that scary. It's going to be a cool film. And so that's where I came up with Shrunken Heads
Oh wow.
by Richard Band with and I didn't realize this, but it's a theme by Danny Elfman. And what this is essentially a superhero origin story for these three heads. And what happens is these these three boys are essentially trying to keep their neighborhood, um the bullies away, and that sort of thing. So what happens is that they get killed, but they're brought back by a voodoo priest and turned into these shrunken heads who have superpowers. And it's such a fun score. I mean, Richard Band has this tendency to take these really simple concepts and just make them so much fun. I keep thinking of Reanimator and that sort of thing. But Shrunken Heads, first of all, is not a film that I was generally aware of, and a score that was just so obscure that I was like, I've never heard of this at all, but it is so much fun. There is there is voodoo chants in this. There is just this. It's this kind of while it is a superhero origin story, there is no superhero move music in it. It is this kind of fun, creepy, zombie-like approach to the score, and it is so much fun. When I first heard it, I had to listen to it a second time to catch all the stuff that I missed the first time by going through it, because I was going, God, this is so much fun. And again, like I said, I'm not all about the scares at Halloween. Yeah, I generally don't consider myself a horror guy, though the next two choices will kind of put that into question. But yeah, I also like the kind of films that um play with the idea of horror as kind of a bit of a humorous concept, but also as kind of turning people. It reminds me of Monster Squad or
Mm.
something along
Hmm.
those lines, where it's a movie about kids, but it's not quite. It might be like a PG-13 pushing an R rating, and so that's where for me where Shrunken Heads really shines. And Richard Band is a very underrated composer, and definitely needs to be more well known than he is. So Shrunken Heads for me. It was definitely one of those scores that first of all surprised me when I saw it at The Beat Goes On,
Wow.
and second of all was kind of, I got to pick this up. I mean, I can't just leave it there. It's frickin' Shrunken Heads with a theme by Danny Elfman. What more do you
Hmm.
want?
What label released it, or was it a promo?
Oh, it's actually a Full Moon Records, Full Moon Studios had their own record division as
Okay.
well. So they released a lot of scores to their films. So stuff like Tracers or Trancers
Hmm.
and Doll Man and all of these Full Moon Video scores actually got a release. Now, some of them showed up on Entrada, later were released on Entrada, but generally,
Right.
for the most part, these scores were generally released by either through Full Moon Video or Full Moon Records.
That's interesting. Is it a is it electronic? Is it sampled? Is it
It's an
orchestral or
orchestral. It's an
yeah,
orchestral.
is
It
it
does
okay?
have that orchestral feel to it. It's very probably about a 30 piece.
Yeah,
Very similar to Event Horizon, oddly enough,
yeah.
but very small. And of course you've got the voodoo chants and all of these really fun elements that show up in it. And for me, it's definitely something that if you find it out in the wild, definitely pick it up. And even if you can't, have a listen to it on either YouTube or wherever you can find it,
Yeah.
because it is definitely worth checking out. The film maybe not so much, because I saw the trailer for it and it was kind of like, okay, could be fun. Could be a kind of like a sit down and make fun of it, kind of a la Mystery Science Theater 3000. But yeah, it's one of those films and scores for me that, for the teenagers and for the even somebody just like preteen, just getting into horror and just kind of introducing them to those kind of concepts, Shrunken Heads is probably a good way to start. So
Well,
yeah.
I have never heard it before, so I will take your recommendation and try to go find it.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
cool. Cool.
I don't think my next selection is necessarily horror, but its music is pretty terrifying. I think
Yeah.
it's more into that kind of it's not even action. It's more of a thriller, really dark, brooding thriller. And it's David Fincher's Seven.
Mm.
This is one of my favorite films of all time. Uh, I will watch it yearly because it just is a gift that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
It's one of those movies you just kind of wish you can go back and see again for the very first time.
Yeah, it's funny. We discussed that at the Journey Symphony, was
Okay.
that a lot of people were saying, God, they wish they could go back and listen to and experience this film, or sorry,
The
experience the
game.
game and
Yeah.
experience the score for the very first time. It's that kind of transcendental for
Well,
that.
that's it.
So
You don't
yeah.
have the too many movie going experiences like that. And the thing is, I watched this as a double feature. A friend of mine used to introduce me to movies back in high school, and I'd
Oh,
heard about these two great films that I never really got to the theater all the time. So when stuff came on VHS, I would pick it up and watch. And so she calls me over to her house and says, I got these two movies to watch, and they're both Kevin Spacey movies. And she had to show me um Seven first, and
okay.
then she showed me The Usual Suspects.
Okay.
It's like
Two.
two movies that you wish you can go back and watch again and
Yeah.
see if you figure it out. Um, because yeah, I mean, Usual Suspects is a whole different thing. But that was one heck of a Kevin Spacey double feature
For
and
sure.
movies. And but um, Seven was something where just even right off the bat, it just sets the atmosphere of just kind of this dark atmospheric dread rain-soaked city, which I don't necessarily think that they tell us exactly where they are located.
No.
But it has that film noirish feel to it, but the score definitely is not film noir.
No.
It is definitely rooted in that Howard Shore, as I said, brooding, claustrophobic, atmospheric, experimental sound that he was
Yeah.
working on with David Cronenberg. And it's so sad. I'm gonna get off a little tangent here on David Fincher because David Fincher has kind of basically two eras when it comes down to music, and it just is. It just annoys me that when 2010 hit, he got into the Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross train
Right.
and just went with them for the rest of the way. And when you look back on that other half, that first half of Fincher's career, I mean, you're looking at scores from, Shore and David Shire and Alexander Desplat,
Hmm.
and they're all just such great. Um, and it's not so much that they're orchestral; they just feel like they are beautifully dramatic, and I mean proper film music. And I just
Right.
don't think that Reznor and Ross do anything for me dramatically or help with whatever story that Fincher is trying to tell. But back to Seven, I think that if you're thinking of any score out of any David Fincher film, it's this and Alien 3 that I think are the best efforts.
Yeah.
And the score, the reason I like it so much is that it is a character in this film.
Yes.
Without it, you just don't get that sense of dread throughout the whole movie. You know this film is leading to something. Once you kind of get into that seven deadly sins thing, and they're trying to find the killer, and they're wondering how in the world he's gonna accomplish this, whoever it is, John
Yeah.
Doe. Um, but the score is essentially kind of one step ahead of you. And all of these interesting, strange, experimental ideas that Shore is introducing, and including these kind of clusters of sounds with orchestral instruments rolling over each other, with kind of these hovering celestes and higher sounds with scraping metals
Yeah.
and other sounds. It just kind of wraps around you and keeps a hold of you and keeps you tight and doesn't really want to let you go and feel anything other than the impending dread. And then when we get to the last half of this, or sorry, the last third of this movie, the finale, Howard Shore is just ramping up the tension with
Yeah.
these thunderous brass blasts and pounding percussion and whatnot. And you're just still right up to almost the last frame of this movie. You're just wondering what is going on? Why is it so intense? And then it happens. And there's basically a bit of release with the last maybe minute. With it is just almost 2 hours of sustained dread and claustrophobia.
Yeah.
And
That's not what's in the box. Is it? It's that's not the line you're talking
no,
about. No.
there's a very specific line that he says at the end, and it's that film noir um voiceover that
Ah,
you
okay.
hear, where he's talking about Brad Pitt's character as he's being well, anyway, again, for those that haven't seen it, again, I don't want to give any spoilers, but I
Yeah,
mean, geez, how old's the movie? But I think um, these are tough scores to listen to on CD. And it kind of goes along the lines of Silence of the Lambs for me. And this is actually Silence of the Lambs was the score that inspired David Fincher to hire Howard Shore for this film. But
makes sense.
I think the way that the music builds and creates an atmosphere and creates character and gives this, I think, the city a voice and of course John Doe a voice as well. It just everything just keeps moving forward, and it almost seems like that kind of droning sound from Brad Fiddel's Terminator 2.
Yeah.
Like it's
Uh,
a it just it just keeps going. It just keeps going. It keeps
yeah.
pounding at you, keeps eating away at you, but you want to move forward. You want to know what's happening and every strange, weird thing that's happening. Shore is hitting that, but also, again, foreshadowing to what's going to happen later. Awesome score. One of Shore's best, in my opinion, and one of Fincher's very best movies. And it's just too bad we don't get any more Shore Fincher collaborations because those
Yeah.
two, I think, were meant for each other.
Well, wasn't their last collaboration like Panic Room or something like that?
There was, I think it was Panic Room because then he went on to Splot for Curious Case of Benjamin Button,
Right.
Shire for Zodiac, Chemical Brothers were in there for Fight Club, and then yeah, I went over to Social Network, and that's when Reznor and Ross
Yeah.
invaded. But I think it's exceptional. I think it's an
Oh, yeah.
exceptional score
I
that
agree.
without jump scares.
Yes, this
I
is
mean,
the
there's
thing.
one. There
Oh,
is
yes.
one.
Oh,
It's
yes.
earned,
It is earned.
but it's not a traditional jump scare where the orchestra is like, all 90 players are like blaring at the same time to scare you. It's really an earned jump scare, and but the music is just all over you, all
Mhm.
over this movie. Right from the beginning. I mean, when you're in that house at the beginning of the film, Shore's music just kind of hits and you're like, wow, how serious is this?
Yeah.
And that's what I like about it too. I mean, the idea is crazy and weird, but the film takes everything seriously, and so does
Yeah.
Shore.
Yeah. No, and I can agree with you there. It's Shore's score is, I mean, I'm a fan of Silence of the Lambs, but at the same time, when you think about Seven, and you're right, how it just kind of it's what Shore does with it thematically and that sort of thing. He just it becomes its own character in the film. And when it reaches the ultimate conclusion at the end of the film, there is some really tight moments with Shore's score in there. So yeah, no, I totally agree. Definitely recommend that. Would definitely recommend that. Yes.
And I also think it's interesting to hear kind of like a full symphonic score for something like
Yeah.
this, for a modern thriller. It's not something that we get these days. And I just feel that, and I've always felt this. I've always felt that anytime I heard a kind of a classic orchestral score in film where it just doesn't necessarily belong. Stuff like when I'm thinking of Die Hard, I mean, if you
Hmm.
imagine Die Hard was made now, what kind of score we would hear? But you got this classic symphonic score that was written by Kamen, and it just added a little bit of kind of authenticity to it, or it made me want to take the film a bit more seriously.
Yeah.
And that's what I have with Shore's music here is that Fincher was allowing Shore to absolutely erupt during the last 10 minutes of this movie.
Oh yeah.
And without that music, I don't think, I mean, I would love to. This is another one of those experimentations where you should just turn the sound off, watch the scene um at the end, the last 10 minutes, and see if it impacts you the same way it does when you turn the volume up.
Yeah.
Because Shore's score is just doing so much dramatic heavy lifting, and it makes the movie. I mean, the script is great, the acting is great, cinematography is amazing, everything about that movie is amazing, but then the music just
Just puts that
that bit of
icing on the cake.
magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. No, I agree that the seven. again was kind of I had a like a short list, which was actually a longer short list than would be to call it a short list would be, an insult to short lists. But yeah, so seven was on there, but I kind of removed it for other other scores. And
Thank you. Fair enough. Gave me a
and
chance to talk about it.
yeah, and it's fantastic score. I
Yeah.
agree. Howard
Yeah.
Shore, Howard Shore at his post, no,
This is
pre,
1995. So
right,
that's so
his pre Lord of the Rings
nobody
best.
really knew about him except for maybe the film score community and just, but he was writing like, these brooding scores. He wrote a couple of comedies here and there,
Yeah.
but I mean, this was the style that Howard Shore, we were also used
Well,
to him
he did Mrs.
writing in.
Doubtfire, did he not?
As a Doubtfire, he
Yeah.
did Big.
Yeah.
But it was that Cronenberg sound that most people recognized him for.
Yeah.
But, then all of a sudden Lord of the Rings hits and it's like, oh, Howard Shore is amazing. Who is this Howard Shore? It's like, well, now get back into his back catalog and listen to what he was doing before
Yes.
he was writing fantasy music. And this is, yeah, I mean, some of the stuff is tough. I mean, some of his stuff is tough to listen to. I remember Existence is not one that I can get
No,
through.
yeah, Existence is hard.
Yeah.
I do have an appreciation for Videodrome though.
Oh yeah,
It's
absolutely.
such an unusual score, but at the
Hmm.
same time just has this wonderful vibe to it
Yes,
that
indeed.
just absolutely draws you in. But yeah,
Yep.
Existence is one of those shore scores that I'm like,
Yeah, it's tough to
okay.
get into those ones.
Yeah,
Yeah, but he was. This is one of those ones where it's not very thematic, although it does have motivic ideas
hmm
associated with the characters. And as I said, it really is the city talking along with John Doe and what is going to happen. Like as I said, the musical foreshadowing I think is great because all of those ideas just come to fruition right at the end. And yeah, can't sing the praises of this one enough.
yeah. Oh, I am. Makes me want to see the film again. It's been a while
It's
since I've seen it.
oh
Because
man, I love it.
the thing is, it's for me, Seven is one of those films that you watch like once in a while
Hmm,
because then you can come back to it and it will still there are still things about it that will surprise you.
absolutely.
I found that with it's not a horror film, but The Insider.
Hmm.
With Michael Mann's The Insider.
Yeah,
That's a film for me. I had forgotten more than I remembered for that film.
right,
And
right.
there's so many great moments in there. But at the same time, there's also some great horror films that have that same quality to them that you give them that breathing space, you come back to them, and they still thrill you, and they still kind of catch you at certain moments.
Yeah, it does. I feel the same way every time I watch this movie. This strange sense of excitement as to what I'm going to watch.
Right.
Like, oh my God, I know this is good. I know this is good. And it's always good. And but you can look elsewhere while you're watching the film and look in the backgrounds and look at other things. Can you catch things that you never caught before? It's like watching Sixth Sense again. Like,
Yes.
where are all the clues? Pay attention to the dialogue, the scenes during with certain characters, and what's being foreshadowed and what's not, and like stop at a couple frames and what's in John Doe's books and kind of read along because some dude had to go through and write all of that
Yeah.
stuff. So, it's just it's one of those films that just keeps rewarding you every time you watch it. And it's another one where it's like I could just stop dead at any moment in that movie and just watch it right to the end.
Yep.
It's that good. It's brilliant filmmaking and brilliant film scoring.
For sure. All right. My next is actually a video game score.
Mm,
And I horror video games can be very hit and miss when it comes to their music. Um I was originally going to be choosing Silent Hill from 99, but when this score came along to me, I thought this was kind of a unique out of the box the kind of stuff that yes, Silent Hill does have that out of the box feel to it, but this 2006 video game really struck me, and it's a game called Scratches. and
Okay.
it was done by a studio, I believe they were called Nucleosis. And it's two guys essentially that were developed this game. It's a point and click adventure essentially. And you're gonna love this, Eric. The name of the composer, and it is a singular composer, I looked it up. The name of the composer, he goes by the name Cellar of Rats.
All right.
So it's music from scratches by Cellar of Rats. And it is such a creepy. There are moments in this score, you go through the basic premise is that you buy this house. You're a writer and you buy this house, and the house, things have been going on in the house that you might maybe a murder happened there. There's like a creepy African mask that shows up. It's all of these weird things. You find certain things in rooms, and it's just you exploring the house. And there are very few, as would go with jump scares. So you go down into this basement. You're trying, the power's out in the house, and you're trying to figure out something wrong with the fuses. Something's up. You go down to the basement, you check the fuses. Nothing's wrong. Somehow, for some reason, there's power out in the house. But as you get down into the basement, this theme starts creeping in. And it gets more and more and more intense as the longer you're down in the basement. It keeps you on edge. And that's, I think, the whole premise of this game is it's to keep you the premise of the score and the game, it's to keep you on edge all the time while you're exploring this house, trying to figure out what is going on or what has happened and where these scratches are coming from. And these are audible sounds that show up in the film because Cellar of Rats also did the sound effects for the film as well.
Okay.
So there are some really amazing um short pieces. It's the score itself is probably about 50 minutes long, but when it shows up, um think of think of think of the score as the Dig
Hmm.
evil,
Okay.
and then you'll get your kind of indication as to how, whereas Dig will put me to sleep, scratches will keep me awake.
I know exactly what you mean.
I mean, I'm not saying the Dig is boring
No,
or
no, no.
anything
I
like
know
that,
exactly what you mean. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
if you listen to scratches long enough, it's like, yeah, you're the game is under abandonware now, so it is playable. I think you can find it on Steam these days,
Mm,
but it's apparently it's very hard to find out in the wild. But if you find a copy, it actually I believe it actually comes with the soundtrack.
hmm.
And the weird thing about it is that um the clips or the music that's done by, again, I love this name, Cellar of Rats, is just, it has this, and I go back to this a lot, vibe. And there is a vibe to this that, again, you're on edge, but there's also these moments of levity. There's also these moments of have I cleared the house of evil spirits now finally? And that sort of thing. So yeah, it is a wonderful, um I mean, like I said, Resident Evil, all of these other various scores, they seem to have this standard sound to them where it's, but when I heard scratches, I was like, this is definitely where a game score becomes an art form. And it really it's able to draw you in with the visuals of the game, but also brings you to this point where um it's just it's an amazing experience. And I'm reminded a lot of, again, I'll go back to the Journey concert on the weekend. It's video game music, but when you hear it, it evokes an emotional response. And you really, like, whether the response is horror or whether it's elation or joy or whatever comes, like what comes with the Journey Symphony. Um Video game music is doing that a lot more than I think even film music is doing it these days. But
Yeah, I agree. And I think, I mean, video game music has always had a sense of emotion. Sometimes it can be just a
yes.
very simplistic theme, which would bring you a sense of joy, or um, you know, a theme for a dark castle, but they're kind of playing it
Yeah.
as fun. And I think that over the past, maybe 20, 30 years, um, it's gotten more theatrical. And
Yes.
that's where, I mean, and I've heard some video game purists say that they don't like that. They don't like that movie scores have kind of entered the foray of video game scoring,
Hmm.
and things are becoming more cinematic and more movie like or whatever. But I mean, I find that the scores that I like the most in video games are the ones that somewhat mimic a film score, but that means that I find that they are more emotive, that they actually feel, they help tell a story. They actually mean something within, again, the narrative of the game. I mean, Austin Wintory's Erica from a few years back
Yeah.
was one where that's where I realized that not only is it technically brilliant because it has to be,
Hmm.
um, but it really digs deep into the character. And if anybody wants to see what Wintory did in creating that score and his process and what he had to do, and why he did what he did, I think you got to watch the making of videos that he has on his channel.
Yeah.
Just again for the score to Erica, which is a very unique, almost cinematic game anyway.
Hmm.
And I'm not much of a gamer myself. So I do a lot of my game watching when I need to, when I hear a great score and I need to hear it in context, I'll watch it on YouTube. I don't play video games. I just don't have time for it.
Right.
And but I find that the music is just becoming better and better. And again, much like a genre of, well, like horror music or the stuff that you hear for animated films, which isn't a genre, it's medium, but there is a certain way that you score an animated
Yep.
film. I mean, a very traditional animated film.
Hmm.
It needs to say more. And I find that music is much more accepted within the video game industry as something that needs to be there, that the makers want to be there, and they are open to any sort of style, again, based upon budget and whatever they need. But
Right.
Some of the best scores I've heard in some any given years has come from the video game uh universe.
Sure.
And and I think you're right. I mean, even some television scores are outdoing film scores. I'm not sure what's happening and why that is the case. But I don't know, maybe it's the oversaturation of just the same people writing all the scores in Hollywood now,
Yeah.
where now you can get a little bit more diversity, and you can experience some of those scores that you used to like, as like for me as a kid, those 80s and 90s. You can get big symphonic scores that you can't hear in Hollywood features, but you can get them in big video game titles now.
Yep.
And so yeah, I think video game music is so very interesting. I mean, there's a lot of it that comes out and gets
Yeah.
released. And I mean, curating a good video game score album also is something that is an art amongst itself. I mean, we'll be talking about curating albums with the next selection that I have.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I'm kind of running around in circles here, but I, just
Yeah.
want to say that I absolutely agree with you. And I would love to have been there for Journey, but man, I mean, the game score on its own is just magnificent. But
Yeah.
then taking the time to rework it as a symphony, I just wish all film composers, video game composers, and TV composers would take their works and somehow try to rework it for concert music
Yeah.
and get it out there. And I also like what you were talking about on your. I know we're getting off the topic,
That's okay.
but just the combination of bringing a proper classical piece and then
Yeah.
teaming it up with something from television or video games or film is just a great way to kind of even bring those two worlds together
Yeah.
and
Well,
and make it work. So
one of the things that I noticed when I was at the concert was the fact that you had on one hand, you had people, you had the audience that was there for Tchaikovsky. They were there for Romeo and Juliet and Tchaikovsky. And then I turned to Tamara at one point when this guy in a PlayStation uh hoodie walks by, and I get, I bet you he's here for Journey. Sure enough, he was front row, watching along with us. But the thing was is that, yeah, one of the things I even said this as recent as this afternoon was what needs to happen is you need concerts like this to have your the people who can afford the season tickets, but also have a group that is coming there and will eventually be able to afford the season tickets to be
yeah,
able to transition so that you get, I would love to see 10, 20 years from now the greatest symphonies of video games that have come out. Austin's Journey Symphonies, I think, is kind of the first stepping stone in that kind of approach. I mean, play and what was the other one? Video Games Live were really trying to do that, but they were also going for more of a rock style
sure.
performance.
Yep.
So I think maybe getting back to those scores like Journey, like The Dig, like Flower, like all of these video game scores that have these beautiful thematic, almost classical elements to them, where you need to be able to have that transition between the eras of classical music and then video game music. So yeah.
Yeah, I think what would be so great for any type of program that a symphony orchestra puts on or whatever would
Hmm.
would be, you know, let's play a piece of music that might have been inspired by or sounds like or is in the same realm
Yeah.
as the film or television or video game piece that we're going to play.
Hmm.
Like you can do we're talking about horror music, you can do a Bartok or a Penderecki piece at the beginning, and then you're like, all right, well, now you've heard all those elements from that type of atonal
Yeah.
music. Well, here it is in Christopher Young's Exorcism of Emily Rose, or
Yeah.
listen to this passage from Close Encounters of the Third Kind by John Williams. Could you believe that he actually writes this type of material? And then I think it's a learning experience as well.
Mhm.
and that's so important. And even like CDs. I'm not sure if you heard James Horner's Pas de Deux, the double
No, I didn't get a chance. Or
cello concert. Well, it's great because you hear his classical work, and then they play, I think, three different pieces that sort of sound like the approach that Horner was going for with
yeah.
his. And I love that because then it opens up me to more classical music.
Hmm.
And that's just a gift. Why would I not want to explore that stuff? Going, oh,
Exactly.
wait, I actually liked what he wrote for Pas de Deux. What else is out there that sounds like it that I could explore and maybe study and whatever? So, yeah. Anyway, we're off on a tangent. But,
That's
but
okay.
no, I agree with you. I hope that more symphony orchestras are open to that type of program,
Yeah.
and instead of just playing the same old stuff that I look at it, I'm like another Beethoven's Ninth. Okay, what else you got?
Yeah.
So anyway,
All right.
so yeah,
So
we're talking about kind of experimentation,
yeah, and
and here's an interesting one where what you get on CD isn't necessarily what you hear in the uh in the film,
right.
and done on purpose.
Yes.
And Christopher Young, we all know him from Hellraiser and Drag Me to Hell and all that goodness.
Yes.
Um, but what I like about this score to Sinister is that it just is totally the opposite of what we expect from Christopher Young,
Yep.
and also totally the opposite of what we expect from horror music, because usually we get horror music that comes from that Polish Hungarian school of concert music, Ligeti and Penderecki, lots of experimentation in the orchestra, a massive sound and clusters and things of that sort, and I love it. I could listen to that stuff all day.
Yeah.
um you hear it in The Shining, you hear it in The Exorcist. I think that stuff is wild. And if you ever looked at a score written in that style, it's the weirdest thing you've ever seen.
Right.
But Christopher Young is a huge fan of experimental music, atonal music, and one of the quotes that he came up with when he was talking about this score to Sinister, and it takes him back to being a kid and being a kid at a piano for the very first time. And he
Yeah.
talks about, what's the first thing you do as a kid when you're at a piano? You just basically pound the keys with your fist and just make a whole bunch of noise that
Yeah.
isn't musical, harmonic whatsoever, but you just love it. It's a sound that you're creating with your hands. It's just so weird.
Yeah.
So again, we're used to what Young has done with the grand gothic horror music, but I bring Sinister to the table because this was the first score in his career that utilized no orchestra whatsoever.
Yes.
And any traditional instruments were all sampled, and at times it's manipulated, transposed, reversed, whatever. You have no idea what these sounds are.
Mm.
And so I like that later in Christopher Young's career, he was able to do this. It was offered. He didn't have to resort to his, I guess you could say cliches, but
Yeah.
things that we do love about Christopher Young. But and I would love to hear another Drag Me to Hell or big symphonic opera or whatever. And we're probably
Yeah.
going to get that with Nosferatu anyway in the next couple of months. But
Right.
man, go in this direction. All right. What could he do? And the fact that he's always wanted to do this, not just for different sake, but this film is weird too. It's
Yes.
just it's just weird, and so the score is weird. And I mean, it really is insane and basically complements the. I think it's a wonderfully acted film. The
Yeah.
direction's great, cinematography is awesome, the atmosphere is great. It just kind of turns into a very cliched horror movie near the end, which kind of sucks. But oh, also the hyperbole around the film was hilarious. I think was it in the marketing where it said it was like one of the scariest films of all time or something like that. Like they analyzed viewers' heart rates and that's what they used for the marketing. And so like I remember seeing it going, oh, apparently this is the scariest movie of all time, and it was far from it. But anyway, so the score that you hear in context, well, Christopher Young's forget that. I'm gonna create my own CD and I'm gonna add things
Yeah.
that you don't hear. And one of the elements are these whispering voices that are in the score. They are nowhere to be found
Right.
in the film at all. But he just wanted to add them for the sake of adding them for the listening experience.
Yeah.
And I have it here that he said that the creation of the CD, um, where was it? He said the first 11 tracks, including all the whispering stuff, is just for album only. It's just all the reworked stuff. And then he has like a 10-minute piece that's
Yeah.
actual score. And then there's some weird dance remix
Yeah.
track at the end that's just like bonkers. It's a bonkers CD. It's
Yes.
like, it's not one of the most enjoyable things to listen to, but
I disagree, but I thought it was brilliant.
I think it's weird. It's not something I would like, oh my God, what do I listen to now?
Yeah.
It's sinister.
Yeah.
And it's not, and I'm not saying that it's bad when I'm saying that. It's just not something I would want to reach
Well,
for. But
this is what I was saying. Scores that are difficult to listen to are not necessarily bad.
exactly,
And it's
exactly.
the thing is what it does is it challenges the listener to take that next step with the composer to say, where are we going with this? And Austin Wintory's Grace is like that. Um Silent Hill, the first Silent Hill video game is like that. You have to make that commitment. You can't just go into it and go, this sucks, I'm done, that sort of thing. You have to continue to listen because you hear there is more there to listen to than just the clanging and the banging or something like that. There is definitely a process and a mind at work here to bring that music per se to the to a film like that.
Yeah,
Now, I have not seen the film. I will have to check it out.
you have to check it out. It's the content is disturbing enough,
Okay.
but it's nothing that's going to make you overly like sick or gross you out. I just think
Okay.
that the aspects of the some of the plot is like that's a bit much. But it's really well done. It is really well done, and
Yeah,
and
I
I'm
agree.
glad I saw it. But I mean, again, the score and context really does help sell the film.
Mhm.
And but then I again, this is the type of album that drives some score collectors absolutely crazy. But I think it's one of those ones again because it's so experimental that I don't think many would say, "Hey, where's that cue?" And that way they would appreciate its expansion of ideas on the album. It works more as a kind of a classical um, or a what's the word I'm looking for? Not experimental, but anyway, forget that thought. Um, I lost my train of thought. But anyway, it kind of it works on its own as various different ideas that Young was working on. But
Yeah.
I also like again, I'm not a huge fan of of, let's say, doing different for different sake, but I
Yes.
do like the fact that, later on in Christopher Young's career, he was given an opportunity and a chance to do something that he's always wanted to do, apply it to a movie, which gave him that opportunity to do it, but it also works so well, but also shows us a different side of Christopher Young, a side that he's always wanted to produce. And so I appreciate that. And as I said, I mean, for me, the making of is way more interesting, I think, than the score. But I mean, there's some
Yeah,
interesting things about the score as well. But I
for
mean,
sure.
digging deep into its making, and it makes me appreciate more as to what Christopher Young did. If I had to just kind of went in blind, I kind of wish all this was in the liner notes. Really, I wish there was
Yeah.
more. I mean, there is some. I think there is a comment from Young, but I just wish there was kind of like, this is the sort of thing where it's like, I'm really changing up things, but here's my state of mind when I was writing it, what I'm
Right.
doing, and listen to this track and whatever. And so liner notes are so important. But anyway, yeah, Sinister, if you really want something crazy, weird, and experimental and just out there, and I don't think a score like this has ever been produced. It's sound wise, like
Yeah.
um, like there was I think there's a Duke in here that was all manipulated and all. It's fascinating. It's a
Yes.
real fascinating score. I'll leave it at that.
Cool. No, I agree with you on that. It's when I was like, well, Christopher Young and Sinister. I haven't heard this before, so I popped it in the CD player and had a was like, this is really interesting. I'd really love to see what how the film deals with this as well. So yeah, I'm on board with the whole idea of Christopher Young getting a chance to do this because he's always wanted to do it.
Hmm.
And I'm glad he had a chance to do it because it's a wonderful experiment.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
really enjoyed it. All right, well, a little backstory on this last film. Um, it could should come as no surprise that this poster is up in my space. It is my favorite film of all time. I first discovered it back in probably well, this was from a time when you actually had to rent a VCR along with your tape.
Oh yeah, I remember those days.
And so, we'd go to Jumbo Video, you'd you'd spend like an hour in there trying to find the film that you wanted to watch. And this was we my cousin and I were not old enough to see this movie. But my mom still said, "Ah, it's fine." She was cool that way. She would allow us to watch horror movies and scary movies as long as she was either close by or in the room. So that and we had to watch the entire thing because if we were to stop halfway through, our imaginations would be worse than than the film itself. So I'm talking about John Carpenter's The Thing. And it for me, I have watched it every Halloween since I first bought the VHS tape back in 1993. So I've watched it every Halloween. I've gone through DVD, and now I have it on Blu-ray. The film just loses nothing. I've actually seen it 3 or 4 times on the big screen. Thank you, Apollo Cinema, for bringing it because it's one of those films that for me, why at the time they thought they actually called John Carpenter a pornographer of violence.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking, oh, this is a masterpiece film.
Hmm.
This is it is suspenseful. It's edge of your seat, isolationist cinema. But at the same time, you've got Ennio Morricone's score, and it sits at points in the background, but then of course there's that opening boom, boom, boom. and to this day, um, I still get chills when those opening notes hit. And it's just it's a wonderful approach. Now, it was augmented a little bit by John Carpenter himself, but the main score is done by Ennio Morricone. And from what I understand, I actually did get if you watched my thank you video for the recommendation 100 views, I talk about the thing expanded, and they're going to talk a lot about the score in this because it's going to be apparently the documentary is going to be pushing like 4 hours long. So it's going to be a comprehensive look at the thing. The great thing about the score to Ennio Morricone's score is just that it is so atmospheric. And again, I always go back to this word, but it's vibe. There's a vibe to it
Mhm.
that just it just if you were to squeeze the disc, it would ooze horror from it. And I do have a bit of a story about one of the cues. I had bought the quartet, which in my opinion has the best mix of the score I have ever heard. And so what happened was I was making dinner and I had just put the CD in, and it got to a cue call or a track called Contamination, and it's got this plucky kind of sound to it. I'm out in the kitchen and I'm listening to the score, and it's unnerving to hear that plucking music in the background to the point where I was kind of like I had to come back and I had to what was that I was just hearing, because it was really unnerving to listen to this. And I think that's whereas Scratches keeps you on edge, Morricone does the same thing, but with a much more orchestral slant. And the score is you listen to it from the beginning. A lot of the music, from what I understand, didn't actually make it into the final film. So John Ennio Morricone's score is some of the stuff you hear is kind of bonus, but it makes you wonder, had they included it, what kind of film that we would have gotten, or what kind of listening experience we would have gotten with Morricone's The Thing. And to me, it is a brilliant the film is a brilliant masterpiece, as is the score, because it is to me what kind of draws me to the film. I mean, I love the film, but the more I see, and the more I hear the film, it just brings me to that that dread every time when it reaches that end. And I mean, when it reaches the questionable end with Kurt Russell and Keith David, um, you really when that final uh boom boom comes in, boom boom, when when Russell and David are talking, and there is just a feeling of dread. And I am all about the downbeat ending
Mm-hmm.
to a film. I
Mm-hmm.
don't necessarily need my films wrapped up in a nice little bow at the end to say, "Oh, this is it was terrible, but this is what happened, and they all survived. Hooray!" No, this is this could essentially be the last two people on Earth that know that the planet is doomed. And um, one of them could be the thing, but we don't know. And that's what I love about the film is that it is such we don't know. There are moments in the film where you're like, who is the thing now, and who is and that's exactly what the original story Who Goes There was all about. Was kind of there was these 20, from what I understand, 27 main or 27 characters in the film, which would have been insane to shoot. But and it gives you that feeling of who's the thing, and would they know they were the thing, and all of this. And again, that is to me that is accentuated in a big way by um Morricone's score. And there's a favorite cue of mine called Bestiality, and it starts off dun 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 da 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 da, and it just builds. It's it's what John Carpenter would aspire to be as a composer if he was Ennio Morricone,
Yeah,
because Ennio Morricone was emulating Carpenter's style.
sure. Yep.
And in my opinion, the choice of bringing in Morricone was a brilliant choice, whether it was Carpenter or studio influence. In any case, it was a masterstroke to bring in Morricone for the thing. And in the end, I honestly think that there's a lot to discover, especially with the remastered version that came out a few years ago on Quartet Records. It is a it has been masterfully remastered, and just the sound on it is crisp. And like I said, if it can unnerve me after I've heard the score dozens of times, something they were doing something right with the way with the way they remastered the score. So yeah, it's in my opinion, it's John Carpenter through, or it's John Carpenter through Ennio Morricone, and it's enough outside of the box that I definitely say, if you can find it, have a listen. You will not be disappointed. Just don't listen to it in the dark.
True. Yes. I again, I think what makes this approach to scoring um so great compared to, let's say, other horror films is
Hmm.
it takes the material, the source material, uh seriously.
Seriously, yeah,
Um sure, at times it's a creature feature. At times it's genuinely terrifying, visually shocking,
yeah,
but it takes everything about it deadly serious. It's a
yes,
drama. It's a drama film
yeah,
that just happens to have elements of horror. And I think that Marconi's kind of sparse score, I mean, he sets you up right at the beginning, like you said. Much like we were talking about Seven, and you have this impending doom already.
yeah,
It's like, well, wait, hold on a minute. What's happening with this wolf out in the Arctic, and there's a helicopter? What in the world is
yeah.
happening? Why?
Why are these guys
And
shooting at the dog?
right,
What
so it's
is
like, but then you have Morricone's music all underneath that, and it's like, what is happening here?
yeah.
And you know what, yeah, the music. I mean, the funny thing is, I have you heard the re-recording that was done by BSX Records?
Yes, yeah, I
So, I
have.
mean, I think you and I have both praised and loved their work on Blade Runner.
Yes.
Um, but what did you think of what they did with because I think Alan Howarth was involved in
Yes.
producing that album as well. They
No.
resequenced it though. I think it's all the same cues from the OST, but they
Yeah,
resequenced it in order. But
yeah, they did it in film order, and I actually didn't mind that.
hmm,
Um, because I've used it on a couple of occasions to to kind of bring people into the fold. I said, yeah, the music to the thing, if I was to give you um the Varese or the quartet CD, it's not in film order, and you'd be kind of like, this goes all over the place. But the BSX does that kind of straightforward approach. And but the fact that they re-released on Quartet Records the original sequence of the Varese album, in my opinion, is a better listening experience
right, right.
for the thing.
Yeah, because I was questioning like why is BSX doing this? I think they were just doing it for the sake of reorganizing everything into chronological order, which is fine. It's
Yeah.
experiment, see how it works and whatnot. But I don't think it's necessarily that bad. It just doesn't seem like it's one that I mean, again, I'm nothing against re-recordings, and I think you know that I'm a huge proponent and fan of re-recordings, but it's just kind of one of those ones where it's like, maybe not. Um, but anyway, and another question I have for you again pertaining to the film itself. I mean, you saw this on VHS first,
Yeah.
correct? So you would
Yep.
see pan and scan. I mean, I think it's one of the most beautifully shot widescreen movies. I mean, this one just proves to you that John Carpenter's an actual filmmaker. Like this
Yes.
guy can set up a shot. He knows what he's doing when he's filming. He's not just like, some schlock horror guy. It's like this guy can shoot and shoot masterfully. He's an
Yep.
artist. And so I wondered when was the first time you saw this as widescreen? And that must have just blown your mind.
I first saw it on widescreen because I was kind of a widescreen snob. I was
Hmm,
always looking for the VHS copy that had
me too.
the
Yep.
widescreen presentation. I first saw it again. There was that time with the VCR from Jumbo Video, but then I recorded it off of TV, and the TV edit is, is an interesting beast in and of itself. Um, because it's one of those it includes a lot of things like voiceovers and doing things with the characters
Hmm.
and that sort of thing, additional footage and that sort of thing. So it's a different viewing experience. But yeah, that whole pan and scan, but seeing it in widescreen on a really nice TV for the very first time, I would liken it to the first time I saw it in the theater, a beautiful digital reprint of the film, and seeing it. I think I got more out of it seeing it in the theater for the first time. I mean, there were character aspects that most of the time I'm sitting like a few feet away from the screen when I'm watching it on the computer, but seeing it on the big screen, you catch detail and you catch things about it, and of course that cinematography, that bleak white um atmosphere, and the scenery is starkly beautiful, and Carpenter approaches it in such a way that it enhances the whole isolation and how small these characters are in this larger universe, and they have no idea what's coming for them. And I think it's there's a brilliant opening shot of in the film, and it's just this static wide shot, and all you hear is a helicopter coming towards the camera, and you're looking for it, you're not sure what it is, and then you see it, and then it cuts to a closer shot of the helicopter. But it's that opening shot. It's wide, it's panoramic, it's beautifully stark, but at the same time, it sets up that whole that we are in a place where you are not going to get in or out of easily. And that, in my opinion, really sets this movie. That it's the cinematography, it's the acting, and it's the music that really bring this whole this whole, and of course the special effects, which have lost nothing over the
Stunning.
years.
Absolutely stunning.
And for me, it's gonna be interesting to see what, if they actually, there is talk of Rob Bottin, who did the effects. He's generally a very reclusive man, so they are really trying hard to get an interview with him to talk about his special effects for that film. So I'm really
Well,
looking forward to
did
that.
did you see the Aliens expanded documentary?
I did not.
Okay. So, if it's and I think it's the same team that's
It's the same
behind.
team, yeah.
So, my lord, you're in for a treat because at the near the end of production for the Aliens documentary, they did not have Sigourney Weaver at all. They were ready to release this without talking with Sigourney Weaver. And then
Huh.
at the last second, they got her. So I think if they can do that with Aliens, they're going to be able to get anybody and everybody to talk about the thing because these guys are really doing exceptional work and
Yeah,
just it's like that DVDs DVD extras, but it's an extra expanded version of those
yeah,
kind of behind the scenes because it's really everything you ever wanted to know about a film. These guys are doing it right. So I think you'll be incredibly impressed with uh with the thing, and I'm really looking forward to that one
I am
as
too.
well. Okay, well, you talk about fun. Finally, I'll talk about a fun score. Uh and it really is fun. It's this is one I love listening to around this time. Just a brilliant recording. It's just so much fun. Lots of action, lots of suspense, lots of big bombastic cues, and it's from the sequel to Jeepers Creepers called Jeepers Creepers 2
Yes,
with music by Bennett Salve. And you might not know the name, but you know his music.
yes.
And so if anybody is familiar with TGIF back in the 80s and 90s, he, along with his co-composing partner, uh, wrote the theme songs for Full House,
Oh
Family
yeah,
Matters, Perfect Strangers, and many others. So he was
huh.
working directly with the Miller Boyette Productions studio. And so, I mean, you talk about a guy that's like does not have to write anymore ever again. Probably doesn't have to work ever again. The
Right.
residuals just from the syndication of those shows.
Yeah,
Um, he must have made a fortune on that, but I don't think there's anybody that doesn't know those theme songs. And he said at one point, he said he had 6 shows with his theme music, and
wow.
I think he even maybe wrote the incidental music as well, the background music for those shows. But he said it was 6 shows at once, at one time. So
That's
so that's
insane.
what he was doing, kind of in the mid '90s. Then he got involved in features, worked on a couple of smaller movies, and then worked on Jeepers Creepers, which was a huge success. But then, of course, with any sequel, you know, it's bigger and better. And man, this thing absolutely cooks. And the thing about Jeepers Creepers, the original score, it had again, we're talking about experimentation. The original Jeepers Creepers score also had some interesting experimental sounds and samples, I think electric alligator clips and other implements.
Okay.
They would kind of add those to certain instruments and pluck them and make really weird sounds. And they would have this avant-garde pianist come in and kind of make some weird sounds on his keyboard and whatnot. And basically that helped shape the creeper, the bad guy
Right.
in that movie. So all of that comes over to Jeepers Creepers 2, which makes sense.
Hmm.
But holy smokes, it's the action music that just absolutely knocks my socks off. love the movie too. I saw the original Jeepers Creepers, was fine. Two is crazy good. And in kind of like a cheesy sort of way, but I mean it's just so much fun. And again, when you're talking about the score, when you get to the big kind of battle music, the action music, anytime the creeper is chasing kids and whatnot, it's kind of rooted in that 90s James Newton Howard
Okay.
action stylings, like you're talking about Outbreak and Waterworld and Wyatt Earp and all that. But then you have that Marco Beltrami horror sensibility that came from Scream and Mimic. And if you're
Right.
familiar with his scores, just really huge, over the top modern orchestral scores that were just a whole lot of fun to hear in films of that sort. So those teen slasher movies
Yeah.
got scores like this. I Know What You Did Last Summer and various other scores all very had similar sounding scores. But this one, I think it's about a 46-minute album. It absolutely cooks. And Sean Murphy recorded the score, so it sounds amazing.
Right.
Incredible end credit suite. And so if you're if you think that everything was kind of dread and experimental and crazy from the first three selections I had for you, this one, just if you just want something that's going to be enjoyable from note one to the end of the CD, and just a nice kind of compact playlist of 46 minutes, Jeepers Creepers is one that I always reach for. And I heard the score before I saw the movie. This one came to me via Varese Saraband
Right.
back then. And I got him like, what is this? Spun it and was like, well, all right, well, let's play it again. It's that good. And there's so many cues that are just um kind of all over my favorites playlist, and anytime I hear them, and they're all the action cues for sure. But like the field chase, the big battle, there's a big truck chase that's there's some cues here that are about like 4 or 5 minutes long. Just if you like huge orchestral kind of horror action, this one this one's it.
Okay. I I might have it. I'd have to check. I have
It's
Jeepers Creepers, but
yeah, and he
I
did
don't.
Jeepers
I'm not
Creepers
sure if I.
3 as well.
Okay.
Um, but kind of didn't really do much. I'm not going to name the director for obvious reasons. If you don't know the reason why, then you might want to look him up. But I think Salvi worked on a couple more of his movies as well. Forbidden Warrior was one of them. But I don't think there's anything that tops Jeepers Creepers 2. It's just so well written, so well written. And but if you can find it, I highly recommend it.
Yeah. So yeah, great recommendations. And again, as I always say during this, is get out and listen to unusual scores, not necessarily the standard composers. Have a listen to stuff that listen to the stuff that's outside the box, and stuff that you may not necessarily, because these composers put a lot of work into these scores, and to have them just out there and not being heard by people is a crying shame because there is some really good scores out there. So, Eric, as I always do, and Gimli, are you in agreement? He's in agreement. Like, share, and subscribe. I am looking to reach 100 subscribers by the end of the year. I'm not sure if I'll get there, but you know what? I'm gonna give it a go. So you can hear me every week on Visions in Sound, 12 to 2 a.m. every Saturday morning on Vision or on 98.5 CKWR. I can also be found on my website, visionsinsound.ca. I am on the Twitter at Visions Sound. You can also try my on Good Pods, downloadable app for your phone or other type devices. And I can also be found on Apple Music. Eric, where can we find you?
It's really easy. I'm on all podcast providers except for Spotify. Please stay away from Spotify. They're starting to take down my shows. So,
Oh,
yeah. Uh, if you want to listen to everything and anything that I've done, I think since about 2013, cinematicsound.net is your destination. And we have a whole bunch of great shows up there. Jason Drury just did a Hammer Horror
yeah, I'm
show.
looking forward to hearing that.
It's good. It's really good. And it was written by film music journalist John Menzel, who's like an expert on Hammer horror music.
Cool.
And I am working on, after I'm done with you here, an all request Halloween show, which I was supposed to
Cool.
do last year, but the show screwed up and I couldn't get it up last year. So I'm putting it up this year.
Okay.
And yeah, there's a whole lot of, I'm going to be spending a lot of time working on my 25 favorite scores of the last 25 years. And
Cool.
I've got the list. It's in my book right over here.
Yeah.
And really looking forward to revisiting all of those scores, exploring them, talking about them on my show. And yeah, that should be a lot of fun. But yeah, again, I really hope more people subscribe to your channel. I
Thank you.
think it's great that there's a place where someone is talking about film music constantly. And I hope after your 25 years that you keep going.
Well,
You don't stop.
the plan is that after the 25 years, I said to myself, well, I'm having too much fun doing this. So I've already planned the next year beyond. And
Yeah, good.
I've got some scores that every once
Some.
in a while I'll hear something and I'll go, okay, that's getting added to the list
Yeah.
or
It's
something.
it's great.
Yeah,
I look forward to it. I'm glad, again, like I said, I'm glad there's someone out there that's kind of talking about it on a regular basis.
yeah,
And again, exploring stuff that isn't the kind of norm
yeah.
and the mainstream stuff. Although that stuff's great too. And but
Well,
I wish you all the
one of
success
the
in the
things I
world.
want to make clear is I'm not against
Right.
Hans Zimmer, John Williams, or Michael Giacchino, or any of the other composers that are seem to just pop. Their name seems to pop up all the time doing
Yeah.
stuff. But I'm
Yeah.
also saying that there are composers out there that are worthy of your time. And whether you're on Apple Music or whatever, wherever you hear your music, it's mostly available. I was surprised that I found um Alan Howarth and John Carpenter's Halloween 3 score
Hmm.
on Apple, not Apple Music, um Amazon Music. I was surprised. There are a lot of I also found Fred Mullins' Forever Night on on Amazon Music, and I'm like, this is really good stuff.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's
It's
there
obscure.
there is definitely dated synthesizers there,
Yes. Yeah.
but at the same time, there is a charm to this music that is that definitely needs to be heard. And I'm going to continue to sing the praises of these composers that are not necessarily um in the mainstream,
Hmm.
and ones that people will go, oh yeah, we need to talk about Joe Harnell, or we need to talk about Elliot Goldenthal, or you know um what's his name, Abel Kala.
Abel Korzeniowski.
Yes, Abel, what you said with Penny Dreadful.
Oh my goodness.
That's
I was
that
hoping
was
you were going to talk about that. I saw your list and I'm like, oh, you're bringing up Penny Dreadful.
I was
Oh, good.
again, it was had it been 10, there would have definitely been Penny Dreadful would have been on there.
That's,
There's a
oh,
lot of good television horror scores that are out there that I think also need a really the um the Scream series surprised the hell out of me when I heard it for the first time. And I'm like, whoa, this is television music? This is horror television music? What have I been missing with not seeing this show?
yeah.
But yeah. So
Well, I
yeah,
mean, that's what I liked about your obscure scores show. I still think the one where you played was it Cool as Ice?
yes.
I laughed so much. I never laughed harder when I was like, oh, what? It's not something I would play myself, but I'm like, well, there it is.
Well, the
And they
thing
got a
is,
release.
the thing,
And
well, yeah, this is the thing. It got a release. I found it.
yeah,
I'm like, I'm
yeah,
not gonna turn this one away.
yeah, yeah.
Because the price was right. I found it in a used place. There was used to be a place called CD Plus over on Weaver Street, Weaver
I don't
Street,
know. Yeah.
across from the Highways theirs. And it, I said, I I can't not buy this. And so I picked it up and it was everything I thought it was going to be. It
Yep.
was campy, it was silly, and it had Vanilla Ice all over it. And I loved every second of it.
Yeah. Yeah. So that show's on my network. If you can
Yeah.
find it, Rob did a what 5, 6, 7 obscure scores shows.
Yeah,
If you ever want to do another one,
oh yeah,
please, they are
I've
so
got a
enjoyable.
couple in mind.
Yeah, yeah, they're crazy. It's crazy good. It's crazy good. Because it's stuff I would never pick up on my own.
Mhm.
Never. So I'll gladly let you spend your money and then play that stuff for me. And I feel like you're producing those shows just for me because I'm just hearing stuff like, what is this? But
Yeah.
thanks, Rob. Thanks. You either saved me some money or I'm just having a great time listening to you wax poetic about a Vanilla Ice film.
I think I'm gonna have to turn it into a quick review for the um
Oh my goodness, please do. Yes. It's so, oh God, that's great. Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
will I because I know for a fact it's not gonna get a re-release or
Oh, imagine that.
an expanded
The
version.
Criterion edition.
Yes, in that case. So yeah, get out there, listen to fantastic scores, unusual scores. Don't necessarily stick with the mainstream, but because like I said, these composers are worthy of your time. So Eric, thank you so much for your contributions to this show. Um, if you've made it this far, thanks for listening. And I will just continue to bring I will continue to bring unusual scores to people who I always get comments is that it I had forgotten about this film or I had forgotten about this score. And that's always great to hear. So and I'll say this again, like, share, and subscribe and listen to Cinematic Sound Radio. Um and just make sure that all of the people who are involved in the radio network are worthy to have their shows listened to. So definitely get out there and have a listen. So again, have yourself a great day, and we'll see you soon. Bye for now.